Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Something that I'd started to think about a couple of weeks back was just how low-key the build-up to the Anthony Joshua and Alexander Povetkin fight has been. Like, ridiculously low-key. Usually by this point, the hype online is starting to build, there's a bit of momentum towards the fight, the media is filling up column inches with all sorts of various angles for the public to devour at their leisure. But something is different this time, and I can't quite put my finger on what, if it's one thing or many, but from what I've been able to observe, the overall coverage and general buzz is down, and even on YouTube it's noticeable that fewer preview type videos have been done. People haven't been producing as many of that sort of coverage for this fight yet. Is it representative of a lesser amount of overall fan interest in this particular fight? Or are other factors serving to overshadow it? Or is it a bit of both? And that's what I'm going to try to tease out in this video. So buckle in. Let's go. The first thing worth exploring is, has other goings on in boxing in recent weeks overshadowed Joshua's upcoming fight with Povetkin? Possibly. There's actually been a lot going on in boxing in general, but also in the heavyweight division itself. I mean, Joshua is the big star in the division. He's been carrying it for a couple of years now. But what we've also had more recently is we've had Dillian Whyte fighting Joseph Parker. Tyson Fury's been having his second comeback fight. Kubrat Pulev, he's been in the headlines struggling to get a dance partner for his IBF eliminator. You've had the likes of Bryant Jennings, Andy Ruiz Jr., they've been back in the ring. Jarrell Miller and Dominic Breazeale, they've been beefing with Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder respectively. We've had prospects coming through in the news. There's been a whole host of other fights that have either been discussed, made, or have fallen through. So it has been a busy time. All of that can actually help serve to crowd out potential fight coverage for Povetkin and Joshua. And of course what we've had as well is Deontay Wilder, the WBC champion, and lineal champion Tyson Fury, having successfully managed to grab headlines in recent weeks with the talk of a fight between the pair. They've been criticising Joshua on a whole host of issues, relentlessly I might add, and now they've actually announced they will be fighting. So while Joshua's name has been mentioned a lot, especially very critically, it hasn't really been in relation to Povetkin or the fight that the pair are having in September. And then you have to sort of add on top of this, Alexander Povetkin, he doesn't speak English. He really doesn't talk trash, and that coupled together sort of makes for very little noise in the media. The language barrier, the muted personality, it's not helping generate headlines. And it's a reality that if there's not a whole lot going on to latch onto, it is easier for the media and those on social media, including myself here, to actually cover the obvious and immediate stories that are sort of falling into our laps, that are right in front of us, that involve other fighters and other goings on in boxing. But even aside from that, it does feel to me that in situations like the, say, Pulev/Takam build-up for Anthony Joshua, where those guys, they didn't really speak English, it was their second language, there was actually more floating around in the build-up, to latch onto at that point. Maybe something to consider is that, is there some sort of form of Anthony Joshua fatigue? He's basically been in and out of the headlines for several months of this year, starting in January when the Parker fight was announced, then obviously they had the fight in late March, and then we've had the Deontay Wilder negotiations. An obvious question to also ask would be, did the failed Wilder negotiations hurt Joshua in some way? It's fair to say that that whole saga dragged out in a very public manner, and it wasn't tidy, and it left a sour taste in the mouths of many, mine included. And I'm sure that there will be a cohort of fans who did and still hold Joshua and his team responsible, at least in part, for failing to get that deal done. And I'm meaning beyond just usual Deontay Wilder supporters, because I do think it's naive to believe that only Wilder fans apportion blame to Joshua. I mean, it was both sides that sort of dragged it out. Both sides deserve some blame. And maybe there's a bit of that stank from that situation that's potentially rubbed off. I mean, would that necessarily have a correlation to coverage, though, and the overall sort of amount of media? It's hard to say. I mean, I did do a quick sweep of Joshua's social media just to sort of see what the engagement was like. And he's still getting, well over 1.5 million views on different videos that he's posting. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of likes, and I think even in some cases, hundreds of thousands of likes for certain posts that he's putting up. But it is worth considering that perhaps Joshua's popularity, perhaps it has leveled off a bit. I mean, you can sort of tie in any of the number of reasons that I've already mentioned. And you could also add in that Joshua's 2 most recent fights, they haven't culminated in devastating knockouts. So we're going back to the Takam fight in October 2017. Obviously, Joshua, he was dominating that fight overall, but it ended in somewhat controversial circumstances. The ref jumped in prematurely, and that robbed Joshua of a chance to deliver a proper knockout. Joshua even sort of said he was robbed of that chance, and obviously Carlos Takam felt he was robbed of the chance to continue, extend the fight and see where things went. It did look like Joshua was always going to win that fight, but it did end under, it wasn't the greatest of circumstances. There were boos in the crowd. Not everyone was happy. And then you go to the next fight, which was the Joseph Parker fight, March 31st. Anthony Joshua, he was taken all 12 rounds for the first time. They both fighters spoke of knocking each other out, but then they were both quite cautious, and both were unable to really land anything meaningful on each other. The ref, he also hampered things in this fight as well, jumping in between the pair all night and spoiling any chance of any inside action. And again, a lot of fans weren't happy with what they saw. So looking at this, my read of where things sit is Joshua, he's still got a massive fan base. There is no denying that. A very loyal fan base. But perhaps the hype that surrounded him, perhaps it's come off the peak that had built up after his 2017 win over Vladimir Klitschko. That was a real sort of epic war, a back and forth, come off the canvas to win, stop Klitschko, young lion beating the old lion, passing of the torch, all that sort of stuff. And since then, perhaps, some of the hype has sort of just come off that a bit. It's not quite as big as it was. And potentially, though, all it might take to get some of that back, or potentially get it back to where it was, is a brutal knockout. Get one against Alexander Povetkin, a brutal knockout. It does sort of paper over any cracks. And Povetkin, though, I would note, he's been massively written off by fans in general and bookies alike. He does have the potential to be a banana skin type fight. A lot of people have just completely written him off, and this guy, he can crack. And Joshua's focus, it does need to be on the Russian and on the Russian alone. And with that sentiment, I mean, it was surprising that he put out, or at least he authorized, a social media post about his enemies becoming friends with each other. And he was obviously talking about Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury sort of, working together to trash him, cut him out of the picture, make him look bad, and set their own fight up. And they've been doing that any chance they can get. And it's been quite effective, actually. They've been sort of largely unopposed in the media. And just changing tack here, another thing to consider on the interest front is that Wembley Stadium, so we're talking 90,000 fight fans for this Joshua and Povetkin fight, potentially. That's the capacity, I believe. Wembley hasn't sold out yet. Previously, with Wembley and with Cardiff, for the last 2 or 3 fights, in relatively short order, we've had announcements that they've been sellouts. But here we've got almost a month into tickets being sold, and no such announcement has been made. But what we have had is Matchroom confirm that some categories of tickets have sold out. You can see this in this tweet here on screen. There have been some musings online that potentially less tickets have gone on to StubHub's secondary ticket market, but I can't confirm anything in that regard. So although I've heard Frank Warren waxing lyrical trying to educate the masses about the secondary ticket market, on plenty of occasions, I can't actually sort of say what is going on here, whether it's an interest thing or whether just less tickets have been released to the secondary market. But I did go to StubHub to have a quick look, see what tickets were available, and, just right off the bat, a couple of categories, see on screen here, just sort of popped up as being available. Can we take anything from that in terms of, we've got available tickets. They've been on sale for basically a month now. There's no sellout yet. That's a bit different from previous fights. There's obviously a number of things I've raised in this video that could potentially have factored into it. Maybe it's not just one thing. Maybe it's a cluster of things, a host of factors at play. But maybe it's nothing to do with that. I'd like your views on what you think is really happening. Is there less interest in this fight? Is there less hype? Is there just a bit of a lull here and it's the calm before the storm? Can we read into any of this in any meaningful way? What does it all mean? Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.